The last photo ever taken of Jimmy Howell showed him laughing mid-sentence, his hand raised as if to wave away the camera or maybe the memory. Behind him, the town of South Bend rolled out its Memorial Day parade like a red, white, and blue carpet, kids clutching tiny flags, the high school marching band blaring through borrowed brass, and Vietnam veterans standing stiff-backed in creased uniforms. The year was 1980. The war was over, but no one really said what that meant. Jimmy stood out that day, not because of his ribbons or his bronze star, but because of the way he moved like a man who hadn't quite taken his boots off yet. He was polite, joked with the mayor, shook every hand, but he kept glancing toward the tree line at the edge of the fairgrounds like he was waiting for something or someone. He told his younger brother, Leo, that he'd be home by sundown. We'll grill out after the fireworks, Jimmy said, clapping him on the shoulder. I'll bring the beer. He never showed up. At first, no one panicked. Jimmy was known to take long drives when he needed to clear his head. Sometimes to the lake, sometimes just nowhere. But when the fireworks ended and Jimmy's truck hadn't returned, his mother started calling hospitals. Leo drove all night, headlights carving through dark county roads. No sign, no answer. By morning, they found the truck, parked a mile off a gravel loop near Chano Lakes, keys in the glove box, wallet untouched. The driver's seat was adjusted too far back, like someone taller had borrowed it. But there were no footprints, no blood, no broken glass, just nothing. Sheriff Donnelly tapped the side of his cruiser with a pen and looked annoyed, not alarmed. He'll turn up, he told Leo. Maybe he just needed a break. Vietnam messed with a lot of guys' heads. He wasn't broken. Leo snapped. He wasn't confused. He was trying to fix something. The sheriff shrugged. Sometimes that's when they break. Over the next few weeks, flyers went up across Indiana. Jimmy's face stared out from Carson gas station windows, library corkboards, church doors. The Army said nothing. The VA said they couldn't release records. Without proof of death, rumors spread like brush fire. Some folks said Jimmy had seen something during the war, something he wasn't supposed to, and someone had come to silence him. Others claimed he'd cracked under pressure, a classic PTSD case, and wandered into the woods to die alone. A few even swore they saw him months later, hitchhiking near Evansville, but no one could confirm it. The theories didn't matter to his mother. She left the porch light on every night for 5 years. She never changed his room. On Christmas, she wrapped one extra plate of food and kept it warm, just in case. The town moved on. Families grew up. Wars came and went. Jimmy Howell became a ghost story, a cautionary tale told to new recruits. Don't end up like him. But one man remembered differently. Clarence Kearns had been just an orderly at the South Bend VA, a quiet figure in white scrubs who cleaned up after the psychiatrists and never made eye contact. But he knew Jimmy. They'd talked in the halls. Late at night, Kearns would mop around the therapy rooms and listen to the echo of whispered confessions and rage-filled breakdowns. Jimmy wasn't like the others. He was angry. Yes, but focused. He talked about files gone missing, doses being doubled without consent, vets being taken off-site for experimental treatments and coming back wronged, dazed, violent, or not at all. Kearns didn't believe him at first. Then he saw the reports. Then the files started disappearing. And then Jimmy did. No one asked Clarence any questions. No one came to his apartment or knocked on his door. But every time he walked home from the VA, he felt eyes behind him. When a black sedan idled outside his building for 3 straight nights, he quit his job and left South Bend. He packed Jimmy's flag in a sealed box and wrote "For Truth" on the lid. But he never mailed it. He never told anyone what he saw. For 45 years, he lived in a Lansing rental under a fake name, surrounded by the detritus of a life half lived, a recluse with no friends, no visitors, no purpose, except one: keep the box safe. Keep Jimmy's truth from vanishing completely. Until the day he died in his sleep. Until the day the box fell from the rafters. Cora didn't believe in fate. She believed in coincidence, in bad luck, in paperwork. She worked as a claims adjuster, the kind of person who spent her days untangling people's worst weeks into spreadsheets and forms. But even she felt a strange pulse in the air the day she opened the attic. She'd driven to Lansing with a half-empty gas tank and a half-hearted promise to her cousin Dan. "I'll help you clean out the place, but only for one weekend." The house was a 1-story brick rectangle with peeling paint and a lawn that hadn't been mowed since before winter. Dan had inherited it from a man he never met, a distant relation on his mother's side. Supposedly, a loner named Clarence Kearns, who died alone, no will, no pets, not even a subscription in his name. Everything about the place felt suspended in time. The carpets smelled like dust and loss. The kitchen cabinets were full of off-brand canned goods. And upstairs in the attic was the box. It fell on the second day. Cora had climbed up to check the insulation. Dan had gone to get coffee. One wrong step on the rafter, and an entire shelf of stacked junk gave way. A box tumbled and burst open. Inside, a folded American flag, pristine as the day it was first tucked tight. At first, she thought it might have been Clarence's, a veteran. Maybe, but underneath the flag was a Polaroid, its edges curled and yellowing. A young man in uniform. Dark eyes, wind-blown hair. Written on the back in faded blue ink, Staff Sergeant James Jimmy Halwell. Memorial Day, 80. Cora didn't recognize the name, but something about the face lodged in her mind, like a grain of sand under the skin. She kept digging. Below the photo were dog tags, dulled and scarred, a manila folder filled with notes, hand-scribbled pages, and newspaper clippings. The headlines told a story no one had finished. Local vet still missing. Mother demands answers. VA. Whistleblower. Case dismissed for lack of evidence. Memorial Day. Mystery remains. Cold after 10 years. Cora sat on the attic floor, legs crossed, pages scattered like a paper crime scene. Clarence Kearns hadn't been storing memorabilia, he'd been guarding it. Then she found the tape, a cassette, unmarked except for the date May 29th, 1980, 4 days after Jimmy vanished. She dusted off the old radio in the corner of the attic, popped it in, and hit play. Static, then a voice. I don't know if this will ever be heard, but if it is, you need to understand something. I didn't disappear. I was erased. The voice was male, mid-30s, calm, but tight. Like someone talking through clenched teeth. Jimmy Hallwell. They don't want this out. They've got people inside the hospital. Not all of them wear badges. Not all of them take notes. I've got documents, witnesses, names. They know I'm talking and they know I'm trying to leave. He pauses. A sharp inhale. If you find this, tell my mother I didn't walk away. The tape clicks off. Cora sat, frozen for a long moment, the weight of it all pressing in. A dead veteran, a hidden flag, a voice calling out from a time when nobody was listening. Dan came back up the stairs just as she hit stop. Found something, he asked, sipping his coffee. She held up the flag. This doesn't belong here. They spent the rest of the afternoon cataloging the box's contents. More documents, some typed, some in handwriting that degraded from steady to panicked. A stack of prescription slips with doses crossed out and rewritten. Letters addressed to a P.O. box that no longer existed. One envelope was never sealed. Inside was a list of names, 15 of them all veterans, all from South Bend. Some had stars next to them. 4 had dates beside the names. Cora cross-checked the list later that night. 5 of the names were tied to suicide reports in the early 80s. 2 were listed as missing persons. 1 had been arrested and institutionalized after allegedly hallucinating that men in white coats were chasing him through a grocery store. This wasn't just a disappearance. This was a cover-up. Back downstairs, Dan flipped through an old address book they'd found in the kitchen drawer. Clarence had underlined one name 3 times. Marston. But next to it, in all caps, "Don't call watched." Cora snapped a photo of the entry. She didn't know who Marston was yet, but something told her they were still alive and probably still scared. That night, she sat in the guest room, staring at the flag folded on the bedspread. She couldn't sleep, not with that voice in her ears, not with that look in Jimmy's eyes. She had never met him, had no real connection to him. But there was something about the way Clarence had preserved it all, like he knew someone would come looking eventually. Maybe not the government, maybe not the press, but someone. She wasn't sure what Clarence had been hoping for. Redemption, justice, closure. But she knew what she had now. A box full of questions. And just enough evidence to start getting answers. Cora wasn't an investigator. She didn't have a badge, didn't know how to pull sealed records or follow people without being noticed. But she did have one thing obsession. By the end of the week, her living room was a war table. Printouts, photos, clippings, maps. Red string might have been overkill, but but she'd considered it. She hadn't told Dan everything yet. He was more concerned about selling the house than unearthing a decades-old conspiracy. But Cora couldn't stop thinking about the voice on the tape. The way Jimmy had sounded urgent, cornered, prepared to vanish. She started where any civilian would public records. She found his draft registration, military service verification, and discharge paperwork. What little of it was available, everything about Jimmy Howell screamed good soldier. 2 tours in Vietnam, 1 injury from a mortar explosion, awarded a Bronze Star for pulling a wounded lieutenant out of a firefight, discharged in '78 with honors. Then, a blank, no jobs listed, no apartment leases, no marriage. He disappeared from paperwork almost 2 years before he disappeared from the world. She requested his medical file from the VA under the Freedom of Information Act. Weeks, they said. Maybe longer. She filed it anyway, then turned to the local paper archives. South Bend Tribune, May 1980. The front page was all Memorial Day coverage, kids on parade floats, speeches from local officials, barbecues, honor guards. In one corner, an article no longer than a paragraph. Local veteran missing. Police not suspecting foul play. That was it. No follow-ups, no photo. It read more like a shrug than an alert. But as she kept digging, she found more. In 1982, a small column mentioned that Jimmy's mother had petitioned the police to reopen the investigation. In 1985, she filed a civil suit against the South Bend VA, accusing them of negligence and obstruction. It was dismissed. In 1991, her obituary ran, survived by 1 son, Leo Howell. Jimmy's name wasn't even mentioned. Cora tracked down Leo within a day. He still lived in Indiana, outside Elkhart. Ran a used auto shop. Never married. No kids. She called. The phone rang 5 times. Then a voice. Yeah. Mr. Howell, my name is Cora Stokes. I found something. I think it belonged to your brother. A pause. Long enough that she thought he'd hung up. You're joking. I'm not. His flag. Some letters. A tape. Silence again. Then where? A house in Lansing. Belonged to a man named Clarence Kearns. Another pause. Then Leo exhaled like someone who'd been holding his breath for 45 years. I'm listening. They met the next day at a halfway point off I-69 in a diner that hadn't changed since the 70s. Brown leather booths, burnt coffee, a jukebox that didn't work. Leo was in his 60s now, lean and gray, with the face of a man who'd seen more than he shared. He brought a folder of his own, what little he'd kept a few of Jimmy's letters, a copy of the original missing person report, and an old photo of the 2 of them fishing when they were kids. I don't know why Kearns had that stuff, he said, running a thumb across the edge of a photo. But I remember him. Worked nights at the VA. Always looked like he was waiting to be told a secret. He was, Cora said. She laid out copies of the papers, the dog tags, the transcript of the tape. I think your brother tried to blow the whistle on something, and Kearns helped him. Maybe tried to get him out, but he got scared. Hid the evidence instead. Leo looked at her like he was deciding whether to hope again or walk away. I always thought it was the VA, he said finally. He came back. Different. Not just the war. Something was happening after. They changed his meds every month. He'd show up for Sunday dinner and not even remember eating. He told Ma he was working on something. Told me not to trust anyone in a white coat. What do you think he found? Leo shook his head. Don't know. But it scared the hell out of him. Cora nodded slowly. I think there's more. Maybe hidden in plain sight. Back home, she started researching Clarence Kearns. There wasn't much. He was a ghost in the system. No social media, no LinkedIn, no mention in obituaries besides a single sentence, Clarence Kearns, 74, passed. Quietly, at home, no known survivors, but she did find something useful. A scanned employee directory from the South Bend VA, dated January 1980. Clarence's name was listed under psychiatric ward, support staff. Two names jumped out from the supervisory line, Dr. Helene Marston and Dr. Vincent Tallis. Cora searched both. Tallis had died in 2003, but Marston, still alive, retired, living in Ann Arbor. She made the call. Dr. Marston. Yes, speaking. My name is Cora Stokes. I'm researching a case involving a veteran named James Hallwell. Silence. Dr. Marston. I remember him. The voice had changed. Softer. Older. But unmistakably alert. Then you know he went missing. I do. Do you know why? A beat? Then I can't talk over the phone. They met at a senior co-op the next day. Dr. Marston was in her 80s, but walked with the posture of someone who had spent her life sitting up straight, watching everything. She led Cora to a small reading room at the back of the building and closed the door behind them. Jimmy Hallwell wasn't crazy. She said before Cora could even open her bag, he wasn't paranoid. He was right. Cora felt her heart jump. About what? The hospital was running tests. Experimental pharmacology. They denied it, of course. But we all knew. Off-book studies, unauthorized dosages, clinical research, they called it. But there were no protections, no consent. And Jimmy knew. He saw things, read things, started making noise, writing letters. One day he told me he had proof, said he was meeting someone in Indianapolis to hand it off. Did he say who? No, but he didn't make it there. Cora sat back, the weight of it all pulling her down. Marston looked at her and asked quietly, "Did you find the proof?" I found his flag. And Knurls. 2 days later, the VA sent back Jimmy Hallwell's file, or what was left of it. Cora knew the records wouldn't come clean. She expected redactions. What she didn't expect was silence wrapped in bureaucracy. 87 pages arrived, nearly half of them blacked out, entire paragraphs missing, names replaced with redacted. On some pages, the only visible words were headers, dosage schedule, incident log, patient observation. The rest was void. And yet, there was a pattern, a quiet, buried rhythm under all the blackout ink. Every report stopped Abruptly after May 26, 1980, the Friday before Jimmy vanished. No follow-up, no discharge papers, no transfer, no signature. It was as if he had simply vanished from the building, and the system decided he never existed in it. She flipped through the final few pages and found something odd, a margin scribble, barely legible, clearly not meant to survive copying. In tight, hurried pen, ref case 8-2-34B. Internal inquiry blocked. Use ID or 71F. Cora stared at it for a long time. She didn't know what it meant, but she knew where to take it. Dr. Marston hadn't wanted to meet again. Too risky, she said. Too old to be dragged into old battles. But when Cora texted her a photo of the scribbled reference number, the doctor called her back within 10 minutes. That's a suppression code, she said. For what? Buried complaints. It means someone inside the VA tried to open a formal investigation and got shut down. Internal Affairs flagged it, then iced it. You won't find it in the digital archives. Where would I find it? A pause. There's a warehouse near Terre Haute. Old VA Records Depot. Paper only. Half of it's uncatalogued. No one goes there unless they know what they're looking for. Cora didn't hesitate. The warehouse was the kind of place built for forgetting. And steel walls, no windows, guarded by a man who looked like he hadn't been asked a question since Clinton was president. Cora used her request letter, the reference ID, and a little bluffing about working on a veterans' rights case. The guard grunted. You've got 90 minutes. Inside, the smell was a mix of paper rot, mildew, and air too old to be recycled. Rows of shelving stretched the length of a football field, boxes marked with years and codes, and nothing else. She started with 1980 IA and F. It took an hour to find the right section. When she did, it wasn't in a file cabinet. It was in a banker's box with a busted lid, half crushed under a stack of 1977 personnel audits. Inside a manila folder labeled 71F Hallwell, James Os South Bend, VA. Internal only. Her fingers shook as she opened it. There it was. A summary memo dated May 30th, 1980, the day after Jimmy disappeared. Written by a Dr. Vincent Tallis. Subject: escalation of patient Hallwell. Potential breach. Patient has shown persistent behavior indicating potential to disclose unauthorized activity related to Schedule 3 experimental trials. Despite elevated sedation levels, patient remains lucid and defiant. Attempts to neutralize via transfer blocked by staff resistance. Patient claimed to possess evidence and named contact outside facility. Request for containment denied. Beneath it, one handwritten line in red ink, unsigned. Make it quiet. No reports. No incident. The rest of the file was damage control. A list of personnel to avoid contact with press. A set of legal instructions for how to label any inquiries as mental health misclassification. No mention of Jimmy's disappearance. No mention of police involvement. And then, at the very bottom, a final note, smaller, almost hidden in the staple fold. Patient last seen entering vehicle with unidentified male. Witness Kearns. C. Claims patient intended to deliver documents to federal contact. Subject has not resurfaced. Recommend permanent archival. They buried it. They knew Jimmy was trying to expose them. And when he tried, they made sure he disappeared, not just physically, but on paper. They erased his medical record, sanitized his name, rewrote his sanity. Cora photographed everything. She wasn't a journalist, but she knew how to get things into the right hands. That night, back home, she opened Clarence Kearns' second tape. She hadn't known there was one until Dan texted her earlier that day. Found another cassette, taped under attic floorboard, no label. This time, it wasn't Jimmy's voice. It was Clarence himself. Older. Tired. I can't hold on to this forever. I thought time would make it fade, but it hasn't. Every year, Memorial Day comes and I see his face, hear him say, "They'll come for me." And they did. His voice cracked. I kept the flag, couldn't give it to his mom, couldn't face her. I ran that day. We were supposed to drive to Indy. He had papers, tapes. Said a man would meet us near the old post office, but we were followed. Unmarked car, gray. I panicked, pulled over, told him I had engine trouble. He got out, told me it was okay, told me if anything happened, to find Leo. I drove away. He never came back. The tape ended in silence. Cora sat on the floor for a long time. Outside her window, the wind moved through the trees, quiet, like a secret exhaling. She emailed everything to a contact at Veterans First, an advocacy group that had recently forced the Pentagon to reopen 3 long-buried chemical exposure cases. She sent them the files, the photos, the tapes. They responded in 2 hours. "We're on this. Keep everything safe. Someone will call you." And someone did. A reporter. The reporter's name was Rafi Delgado, a war correspondent turned investigative journalist with a reputation for being both relentless and unshakably polite. He didn't start the conversation with pleasantries. He started with, "How many tapes did you say you found?" 2. Cora replied, "1 from Jimmy, 1 from the man who hid the evidence, Clarence Kearns." He was silent for a second. Then, "You just cracked open a cold case the government tried to freeze shut." Rafi drove up from Chicago the next morning. He brought a recorder, a notepad, and the calm urgency of someone who'd walked through actual war zones and still believed in the power of truth. They met at a diner off the highway, not far from where Jimmy's truck had been found in 1980. Cora had already ordered 2 coffees and was halfway through reading her notes again. "You're not a journalist?" Rafi said, sitting across from her. "No." "Then why are you doing this?" She looked at him, steady, because nobody else did. That seemed to be enough. The next week moved like a controlled detonation. Piece by piece, Rafi and Cora mapped out the puzzle. Jimmy's final days, the VA's internal corruption, the attempted handoff to Indianapolis, the botched escape. Every interview led to another gap in the timeline, another voice the system had silenced. Leo Howell agreed to speak on record, breaking his decades of silence. They always said he ran. He told Raffi, voice steady, but Jimmy didn't run. He stood up, and they took him down for it. Dr. Marston was harder to convince. She gave them one final interview off camera, but quoted, "She held up her weathered hands when they tried to press her for more. I gave you what I carried for 45 years. She said, that's enough." And then there were the names. The list from Jimmy's envelope contained 15 veterans. Raffi and Cora tracked down what they could. 5 dead, 4 institutionalized, 3 still living, but unreachable. And then one man, Henry Gantz, who picked up his phone after the 5th call. "You looking into Jimmy Howell?" he said before Cora even introduced herself. "Yes." I wondered how long it would take. Gantz was frail now, pushing 80, living in a trailer on the edge of Fort Wayne. He'd served with Jimmy, said he'd gotten out a year earlier, but the two had stayed in touch. "Jimmy told me he had evidence," Gantz said they were testing drugs on us. Quiet stuff, memory inhibitors, anxiety boosters. Said the VA covered it under rehabilitation. But it wasn't rehab. It was control. He paused, then added, "I still forget things. Whole weeks. I used to think I was just losing it." Did Jimmy ever tell you who he was planning to meet? Some guy in Indianapolis? Government? Can't remember the name. But Jimmy didn't trust phones. Wrote everything down. Told me, if anything happened to him, look for the guy with the flag. Cora stared at the recorder in her hand. What did he mean by that? I figured he meant a soldier. I didn't know he meant Clarence. By the second week of the investigation, word had spread. A national veterans advocacy group announced a petition demanding the Department of Veterans Affairs reopen the Howell file. Local news started sniffing around the story. Raffi began putting together a long-form expose. But the real moment came when the FBI knocked on Cora's door. She opened it to find 2 agents, plain clothes, badges shown quickly. "Miss Stokes, we'd like to ask you a few questions about a set of classified medical records in your possession." She didn't let them in. Instead, she handed them a copy of the FOIA response she'd legally received and told them the originals had already been turned over to her attorney and a national investigative journalist. The taller one looked annoyed. The shorter one just smiled. "If you remember anything else," he said, "you know how to reach us." As they left, Cora noticed something strange. Neither of them asked who Jimmy Howell was. Then came the email. Subject line, "You need to see this." Attached was a black and white scan of a document that had just been unsealed from a closed federal case in Indianapolis. A deposition from a Department of Defense liaison dated July 1980, redacted in key areas, but clear enough. The witness described an aborted handoff of unauthorized medical files connected to experimental trials performed without patient consent. The courier never showed. The receiving agent filed a missing witness report. The case was shelved under insufficient evidence and identity unconfirmed. The handoff date: May 29, 1980. The missing witness: unidentified male in military background. Last seen traveling from South Bend. They had tried to tell the truth, but the system blinked and moved on. Cora stood at the edge of Chain-O Lakes that weekend, the same spot where Jimmy's truck had been found 45 years earlier. The gravel was mostly overgrown now, the road half erased. She imagined him walking out here, holding the files close, heart pounding, car behind him, headlights in the dark. She whispered to the woods, "You didn't run." Behind her, Raffi finished packing up his gear. "You ready?" "Yeah," she said. "Let's go home." The story broke 3 days before Memorial Day 2025. Lost soldier. Lost story. Inside the VA's Forgotten Whistleblower ran as a 10-page feature in the Sentinel. Cora's name wasn't front and center, but Leo's quote was, "He told the truth. They buried it. Now we're digging it back up." It sparked outrage. Hearings were demanded. The Department of Veterans Affairs issued a statement promising an internal inquiry. A few politicians made noise. Most didn't. But something changed. Not in Washington. In South Bend. The town that forgot Jimmy Hallwell remembered him again. Old neighbors showed up at Leo's shop to say they were sorry. A high school history teacher added Jimmy's name to his curriculum on war veterans. A local artist painted a mural, downtown Jimmy, standing tall, his flag in his hands, half shadow, half fire. And at the Memorial Day ceremony, under the open sky, Leo stood at the podium holding the folded flag that had waited too long to be given. He looked at the crowd, then at the sky. My brother didn't vanish. He was hidden. And now he's home. The flag sat in a glass case, front and center at the South Bend Veterans Memorial Hall, just below a brass plaque etched with Jimmy's full name. Staff Sergeant James Jimmy Hallwell, 1947-1980. Service, integrity, sacrifice. It wasn't an official memorial. Not yet. The federal government still hadn't declared Jimmy Hallwell killed in action, nor had they reopened the case beyond a few internal reviews. But the people who mattered, the ones who had waited, who had wondered, who had quietly hoped for something more than a dead end, had already decided. This was Jimmy's final post. The story had reached national headlines, if only for a moment. Other veterans came forward. A class action suit was filed by a group of Vietnam-era soldiers who claimed they'd been subjected to similar medical experiments without informed consent. The VA offered public condolences, but no formal apology. The military stayed silent, but no one could ignore the voice on the tape anymore. Jimmy's words had cut too deep. I didn't walk away. Cora stood at the edge of the crowd on Memorial Day 2025, watching the ceremony unfold. It felt surreal. Just months earlier, she'd been standing in a stranger's attic, covered in dust, holding a flag that didn't belong to her. Now she was watching the town give that flag a place, a name, a story again. Leo stood on stage in a charcoal suit, aged but firm. His hands didn't shake when he unfolded the paper in his pocket. He didn't read from it, just glanced at it like a lifeline. "My brother was never supposed to be a mystery," he said, voice steady. "He came home from a war that never really let go of him. And when he tried to speak, they silenced him." He paused. But Jimmy wasn't alone. Someone helped him. Someone tried to save what they couldn't say out loud. And decades later, someone else finally listened. He turned slightly, looking at Cora in the crowd. "She didn't know us. She didn't owe us anything, but she didn't let the truth rot in a box." A long breath. We can't bring Jimmy back, but we can bring his story back. We can carry his voice. And today, that's what this flag means. There was no applause, just quiet. The respectful kind that echoes louder than clapping ever could. After the ceremony, people wandered inside the memorial hall. They read the exhibit that Raffi had helped put together, a small but powerful installation called Erased, Not Forgotten. It featured Jimmy's uniform, the photocopied notes, the Polaroid that started it all. There was a screen on loop, playing clips from Raffi's expose and quotes from the tapes. Clarence Kearns was mentioned too. He didn't get a plaque. But in the final panel, beneath a quote from Jimmy, "Someone needs to know what's happening at the VA," there was a sentence preserved by Clarence Kearns, a man who carried a secret longer than anyone should. Cora stood near the wall and watched people read it. Some of them cried, some just stared, others whispered to whoever stood beside them. But one woman in particular caught her attention. Late 60s, gray hair in a braid, wearing an old army surplus jacket. She stood in front of the panel for a long time, then turned and walked up to Cora. "You the one who found him?" she asked. "I found his flag," Cora replied. The woman nodded, her eyes rimmed with red. "I had a brother in that same unit. He came back broken. He told me stories about the pills, the experiments. We thought he was just sick." Cora said nothing. Let the silence say what it needed to. "I believe you," the woman said, "and I believe him." That night, back in Lansing, Cora climbed into the attic one last time. The place had been cleared out. Dan had sold the house, but she asked for one last look. She crouched in the same spot where the box had landed, where dust had exploded like a time capsule, breaking open. There was no flag now, no photos, just the wooden boards, bare, plain, but not empty. Cora pulled a pen from her coat pocket and wrote something small on the underside of the attic beam. He told the truth. Then she climbed down, closed the door, and walked away. 3 months later, the Veterans Affairs Committee quietly passed Resolution 482, authorizing a full historical audit of non-consensual medical testing practices conducted under VA oversight from 1965 and 1985. No names were mentioned, no apologies were issued, But it was a start. And one of the committee members, a junior congresswoman from Illinois, closed the hearing by holding up a folded flag and saying, "Let this be a reminder that silence does not equal peace." In South Bend, the porch light outside the Hallwell house, off for 20 years, was turned back on. Not as a vigil, as a welcome. Because Jimmy Hallwell wasn't missing anymore. His story had come home, and it would never be erased again. The story of Jimmy Hallwell is more than a mystery solved. It's a stark reminder of how silence, bureaucracy, and fear can conspire to bury the truth. But it also shows the power of persistence, the impact of one person deciding to ask questions, and the weight a single voice can carry across decades. It teaches us that forgotten stories still matter, that justice delayed is still justice worth pursuing, and that sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't medals or monuments. It's the courage to speak when the world would rather look away. Thank you for watching and for sticking with us through this powerful journey. Stories like Jimmy Hallwell's deserve to be heard, remembered, and acted on, and your support makes that possible. If this story moved you, taught you something, or made you think, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss more investigations and untold histories like this one. And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below to let us know what you thought, what questions you still have, or what stories you think need to be uncovered next.